Great. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to our webinar today. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm Helen Morris, and I'm an undergraduate student studying environmental science and policy at Duke University, and I'm a Defenders intern working with the Southeast Field team this summer. Just a few logistics. Please keep your microphone muted to minimize our background noise on the call. And if you have any questions or comments along the way, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. At the end of the presentation, we will have the floor open for any questions or comments you may have too. So to get into it, Lunch and Learn is an educational series offered by Defender's Southeast Field team to bring you up to speed on current projects and to let you know how you can help. So today we're going to talk about a program we've been working on for decades, the protection and recovery of the critically endangered American red wolf. Many positive outcomes have occurred since our red wolf webinar a year ago, and we're super excited to share them with you today. So to get things started, we're curious to know if you attended last year's Red Wolf webinar, and how familiar you guys are with the Red Wolf. So we're going to launch a poll to ask that, and I'm going to use my Zoom capabilities to hopefully do that successfully. So I'll share the results. And it looks like we have a lot of newcomers today. So that's super exciting. And for those of you who seem to be either somewhat familiar or very familiar with it, we're glad you're here. And for those of you who are just now starting to learn about it, we're super glad you're here. Joining me today are members of our Southeast team, Heather Clarkson, who's our outreach representative based in Liberty, North Carolina, and Tracy Davids, who's our senior Southeast representative based in Asheville, North Carolina. Later on, we'll be joined by one of our Red Wolf ambassadors, Dr. Jesse Williams, who's based in Greensboro, North Carolina. And we'll also welcome Spencer Beals, an amazing artist based in Asheville, North Carolina, who's working alongside us to help connect people with wild places and wild things like the Red Wolf through inspiration and art. So now I'm going to turn the show over to Tracy to tell you a little bit about Defenders. Tracy has been a member of this field team for 9 years. She advances the Southeast Field Conservation Program with an emphasis on the Southern Appalachian region. She develops conservation objectives and strategies, and she collaborates with partners to protect and restore the region's imperiled wildlife and habitats. So Tracy, take it away. And I'll stop sharing the poll.
Thank you so much, Helen, and it's really great to have you on the team this summer. Appreciate all of your help. So as many of you probably know as Defenders members, our mission is to protect all native animals and plants in their natural communities. And our approach to this mission is pretty direct and straightforward. So we work on the ground, in the courts, and on Capitol Hill to protect and restore imperiled wildlife across the continent. And our on-the-ground work is the focus of our field conservation program. And we have 6 field offices, field teams across the country. That includes Alaska, California, the Pacific Northwest, Rockies and Plains, the Southwest, and here in the Southeast. And the Southeast is a really important region to protect because we're the most biodiverse region in the country, and we have very few protected areas in a booming human population. So the biodiversity here is facing many threats. Within our region, the Southeast team focuses on 4 primary landscapes. The first is the Southern Appalachians, which, as you probably know, is a global hotspot for amphibians and freshwater fish. Next, we have the Florida Panhandle, which is home to gopher tortoises and sea turtles and many other critters. And then there's the Greater Everglades, or the River of Grass, that is home to Florida panthers, manatees, and lots of other species. And then, of course, the Carolina coast, which is home to the critically endangered red wolf. which of course is the subject of today's webinar. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Heather, who's going to be telling us what has been going on with the red wolf over the past year. Heather's been a member of our field team for 8 years, and she's responsible for leading our red wolf advocacy efforts. She also works with local communities, landowners, and state and federal lawmakers and regulatory agencies to promote and support the Red Wolf Recovery Program in Eastern North Carolina.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, so to begin with, we have another poll, and this one, we just ask you guys to put in the chat to tell us when and how you first became interested in red wolves. I always like to share my own personal story, which to me is very holistic. And I was always obsessed with wildlife. At the time when I was an 8-year-old child, I lived in North Carolina. I was in elementary school, and I used to get those animal fact files mailed to me, not emailed. We didn't have email back then. Mailed to me every month. And I learned as a small child about this wolf called the red wolf. And I was fascinated because I also learned that they lived in North Carolina. And me, as an 8-year-old little girl who was affectionately already called Wolf Child by my parents because of the level of feralness I brought to any situation, I was completely overwhelmed with pride that I lived in a state that had the red wolf. And it was such a big deal to me. And I took that with me throughout the rest of my life. And somehow I ended up seeing a job description advertised for red wolf recovery work. And here I am today. This is actually my 8-year anniversary today with Defenders of Wildlife. So this is all very meaningful to me. And I'll stop my aside, but I always love to share that story because it really does go to show that if you can get children hooked, if you can get children feeling pride in what they have on the landscape around them, that those children will grow up to be the next generation of heroes, and they will grow up to be the ones that continue to do the recovery work. So I'm going to put that out there. All right, so I appreciate everyone in the chats. I see them coming in. That's excellent. All right. So first off, I'm going to give you guys a brief update on what's going on with the wild population in North Carolina over the last year. So the current known population of wild collared adult red wolves in the Eastern North Carolina red wolf population area is 17. That is up 7 since our reports from last year, mostly due to the collaring of the previous year's litter, new breeding season releases, and the trapping and collaring of a previously untracked 7-year-old female wolf, which I personally always think it's really cool when Fish and Wildlife is able to find new uncollared adult wolves on the landscape. The estimated total population of the wolves in Eastern North Carolina currently is 18 to 20 red wolves. All of the collared red wolves have orange collars, which include both telemetry and GPS tracking capabilities. As of June, there were 2 breeding females with puppies on Alligator River Refuge. 2225F is the breeding female of the Milltail family group, and in April she had 8 puppies, which is a fabulously large wild litter. We were really excited to hear about that. Her daughter from a previous year, who was known as 2413F, also had a litter of 5 on the refuge after being paired with a male wolf who was born under human care. Unfortunately, 2413F's mate was recently hit and killed by a vehicle, so the fate of her young family is unknown at this time. Fish and Wildlife Service uses remote camera data and GPS and telemetry to track all the known wolves regularly and to monitor wolf dispersal and their use of the landscape. The Milltail family uses exclusively a 12-mile range on the Alligator River Refuge, demonstrating just how abundant the prey and habitat on the refuge is for red wolves. This year, there were no known litters of wolves on Poquoson Lakes Wildlife Refuge. The service did trap a young wild female who was fostered into the population in 2021, and they placed her in a pen with a male from human care, but unfortunately, Those two wolves were not able to breed successfully, and the female was released back into the wild. As a result of our legal advocacy, the Fish and Wildlife Service continues to release wolves into the wild and implement adaptive management strategies to combat issues like hybridization. In addition to these wolves, there are more than 40 collared and sterilized coyotes in the area. These coyotes are placeholder animals, which means they cannot reproduce. However, they continue to hold territory and prevent new coyotes from moving in. Coyote sterilization is a critical management tool in the red wolf population area and has remained very successful. Additionally, more than 50 remote cameras are deployed by Fish and Wildlife Service across the refuge and the greater area to monitor wolves and other wildlife using the recovery area. These cameras monitor wolves, coyotes, and other species so that Fish and Wildlife Service can get the full picture of wildlife abundance on the refuge. One new concern that we have seen in the recovery area is increasing human presence, which causes wildlife to become habitualized to the noise and smells associated with humans and vehicles. The service and partners are working to combat this new issue and to ensure that the popularity of the wolves does not spell further disaster for the recovery. Road closures have been implemented across the refuge to prevent harassment and incursion into the wolves' territory while pups are still very young. Fish and Wildlife Service recommends that all refuge visitors stay at least 200 yards from wolves and do not linger in their presence. Finally, you'll notice the large orange tracking collar on this wolf in the photo. Like I said earlier, all collared wild wolves in the recovery area are now wearing these bright orange collars in the hope that this will prevent misidentification with coyotes. These collars do not impact the wolf in any way, despite their size. They're surprisingly lightweight, and with the new technology, the battery life lasts even longer, which allows the service to better track wolves through the refuge. The Red Wolf Recovery Plan is a critically important document that serves as a guide for the service and partners as we move forward to restore the red wolf within its historical range. The plan lays out the vision and strategy for this endeavor, and I'm going to read the recovery vision and strategy statements now to give you some additional context. So the recovery vision. In the future, wild and free red wolves will coexist with humans in multiple viable populations across the historic range, where ongoing threats are effectively ameliorated through conservation activities, the public's trust and engagement, and aligned policies among all stakeholders. The recovery strategy reads, the recovery strategy for red wolf focuses on improving resiliency and redundancy and maintaining representation to meet the species' need for viability. Specifically, the strategy seeks to expand distribution of the species in the wild, increase population abundance, maintain gene diversity long-term, and implement collaborative conservation to address species threats as well as societal values related to red wolf recovery. So as you can see, the goal is for multiple populations of wolves that can thrive and coexist with people. This is a vision we share, and Defenders, along with other conservation groups, has joined the Fish and Wildlife Service to embark on a journey we call conservation conflict transformation. This always gives me such a tongue twister. Conservation conflict transformation. So in March, Defenders joined the Fish and Wildlife Service and other NGO groups that are active in North Carolina for a week-long conservation conflict transformation workshop in Durham. This workshop was designed to help bridge gaps in communication and coordination between the federal agency and the NGOs with significant investments on the ground in North Carolina. As a result of the CCT workshop, Defenders and other conservation groups developed a plan to move forward with regular in-person meetings to design cooperative work plans for red wolf recovery in the state. And Defenders currently sits on the coordination committee for planning these meetings. The first of these meetings took place earlier this week in Columbia, North Carolina, and went very well. One of the things that we were able to come up with this week in our inaugural meeting was a mission statement, which I'm now going to share with you. The mission statement of the Red Wolf NGO and Fish and Wildlife Service collaboration team is to collaboratively restore the red wolf through positive engagement and coordinated efforts between NGOs and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service by leveraging our collective commitment, expertise, and resources. And now, hold on. So this just wrapped up this week. We're moving forward with more regular meetings, and we will definitely have more to share with you guys in upcoming webinars. But I wanted to share our mission statement with you since it was hot off the press from our meeting yesterday. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to talk about the awareness raising events that we held last year.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I'm really excited about this because we were able to do 3 significant awareness raising events last year to raise the profile of the red wolf in North Carolina and hopefully beyond. We did this in 3 different communities outside of the peninsula across the state. And we did this really to expand our base of support and hopefully inspire some action for future initiatives involving the red wolf. And one of the things that made these events really special is because they were completely led and created by the 2 volunteers you see in the top center photograph, are 2 of our red wolf ambassadors, Dr. Jesse Williams and Greg McNamara. So they pulled these events together and pulled them off, and they're wonderful. I'll talk about each one very briefly. The first one that we did is the one that's pictured here. This was an event we did in Charlotte on Endangered Species Day. So it was to celebrate Endangered Species Day and bring awareness to the plight of endangered species. And we held it at a place called Industrious in the NODA community of Charlotte, the art community there. And this was a social event focused on red wolf awareness, education, and fundraising. We had music, food, a silent auction with lots of art, and people were really excited about the art. And we raised over $7,000 at this event to purchase 70 coexistence toolkits. Heather will talk about that in a little bit. And these toolkits are for residents within the recovery area. Again, this was led by our Red Wolf ambassador, Greg McNamara, who first got involved with us, I think in 2021, when he attended this webinar about red wolves. And he was inspired and said, I want to get involved. And so we engaged him, and 2 years later, he pulled off this really successful event. And he would be with us today, but he's in Italy attending a wedding, so he couldn't be here. The next event we had was an event in Whitsett, North Carolina. And this was called the Red Oak Brewery Red Wolf Market event. And this was an outdoor event sponsored by Red Oak Brewery, and it featured defenders to raise awareness about the wolf. It was a free outdoor event. It had live music and food, local artists, and it gave us an opportunity to meet new people and inform attendees about the important red wolf and recovery efforts underway. And this event was led by our Red Wolf ambassador, Dr. Jesse Williams, who I believe has joined this webinar. And then lastly, our big fall event was a beautiful event called Who Speaks for Red Wolves? And this was done at the Carolina Theater in Greensboro, beautiful old theater. And again, this event was created to raise awareness about the red wolf. It included a short documentary or a couple documentaries on red wolves. We had live music performances, original poetry readings. We even had a storytelling performance that actually inspired the name of this event, Who Speaks for Red Wolves, and a little informative presentation about the recovery program. And this event was led by Dr. Jesse Williams. And so through these events, oh, actually, before I wrap up, we want to show you just a little minute video about the Who Speaks for Red Wolf event. You may want to turn up your volume. Oh,
to learn about red wolves because
there it is.
the most endangered mammal in America. And yet America does not seem to know about the red wolf. And that's a shame because Americans, I think, want to take care of their most endangered mammal.
Those moments of inspiration, it's enjoying the things that touch our hearts, whether it's music or dance or art. Those are things that really, I think, motivate us to action. And so if the fact that this is not the most endangered mammal in the world doesn't motivate, hopefully the sharing of other stories, performances, music that you're going to hear this afternoon will.
There's no doubt in my mind that people will support this recovery if they just know about red wolves.
Thank you, Helen. So through these events, we were able to reach hundreds of people who didn't know that the red wolf existed right here in their own state and inspire them to spread the word, stay informed, and become advocates for the wolf's protection and recovery. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Heather, who is going to talk a little bit about our plans for the next year.
All right. So we have a lot of irons in the fire, which we always tend to do. Keeps life interesting and exciting. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is our new coexistence mini site. This mini site is for southeastern species, including the red wolf and the Florida panther. And the website is a technical tool for citizens to find information on mitigating and avoiding conflict with our native predator and mesopredator species. So they do not only focus on the red wolf and the panther, they actually cover all of the typical predator species that someone may run into and gives technical guidance and suggestions for how to use non-lethal methods to mitigate whatever damage is being done by the wildlife in your area. So we're really excited about that. It was definitely a labor of love that took quite a while to pull together. And I'm excited to get that back, to get it out into the hands of local citizens in the Southeast. Along with the mini site, we have developed coexistence toolkits. And these toolkits include the non-lethal tools that we recommend on our website. And the kits include things like remote cameras, motion sensor lights, noisemakers, tracks and scat guides, and all of these things designed to help citizens and individuals identify the species that they're experiencing conflict with, and then address that problem without turning to lethal removal. And then Defenders is also working with Fish and Wildlife Service and Dare County to re-fence the Dare County Waste Transfer Station, which abuts the refuge. This transfer station is a hazard for wolves and bears and other wildlife and has contributed significantly to the habitualization of young wolves on the refuge. There's a lot of data between the GPS collars and such that show that the young wolves, unfortunately, get very used to this building and the attractants that are in and around it. And we'll go over there, and the bears as well. So we are using, we are working with the county and Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as our colleagues out west, to use tools that are tried and tested in the Rocky Mountains for both wolves and grizzlies. And we're going to bring them to the East Coast and implement them here as a strategy to help mitigate the conflict in Dare County. And those should begin breaking ground later this year on the new fencing project. So that's really exciting, and we'll definitely keep everyone updated on that. So coming up, we do have some events. The first event I wanted to draw your attention to is the annual Scuppernong River Festival, which is going to be held in Columbia, North Carolina, on October 12th, which is a Saturday. And Columbia, North Carolina is also the location of the Pocosin Lakes Refuge Headquarters and the Red Wolf Center. So we will be there. We will be giving out our coexistence toolkits, as well as assisting with education and outreach at that event. And if you can make it out there, I highly recommend it. That time of year on the peninsula is absolutely beautiful. And then the date is still to be determined. However, we are planning on having a Asheville Sketchbook Club event with artist Spencer Beals, who you'll learn a little bit about here in just a minute. But we're working with Spencer on some very cool art projects that we intend to have culminate in a celebratory event in Asheville once those art projects are finished. And so I think Tracy's going to come back in and introduce Spencer to you all.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Spencer earlier this year. And I'll turn the floor over to him to talk a little bit about himself and his work and his passions. Spencer spent some time in the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, paddling and camping, and was really inspired by the experience and created some beautiful art of the Okefenokee. And then learned that the Okefenokee was threatened by a titanium mine that abuts it. Some of you who follow our work are probably very familiar about the fight to protect the Okefenokee. But Spencer reached out to us and we had a conversation about it. And we came to one of his sketchbook club events earlier this year and did a little presentation about the Okefenokee. And, you know, we realized that we had a lot in common with our love of nature and wildlife and getting people excited and involved with it. And so now we are working together on the Red Wolf and hopefully lots of other projects involving wildlife, nature, and art. So I'm going to turn it over to Spencer to talk a little bit about his work. And I encourage all of you, we have his website at the end of the presentation. Please go to his website and check out his work. It's amazing. And if any of you have pets, he does pet portraits. There are lots of pictures of his pet portraits and they're just stunning. So check out his fabulous work. And if you come to Asheville, find his studio down in the River Arts District. All right, Spencer, jump on in.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was we got the chance to do the Okefenokee sketchbook club together, which was super cool. We had about 40 people come and sort of learn about the issue and make art inspired by it. I've been hosting the sketchbook club twice a month for about a little over a year and a half now. And the image on the left was the first time I did one like purely inspired by the Southern Appalachian biodiversity. So a lot of my artwork is stemming out of nature journaling, which I do a bunch of, and I take people out nature journaling, but essentially just learning the narratives that are going on in the forest. And in the piece to the left, it takes you through the life cycle of the eastern newt, which starts off underwater and then becomes the terrestrial red eft. And as it moves in a circle around the piece, it goes up and it meets the passenger pigeon and the American chestnut, and then the eastern hemlock with the hemlock woolly adelgid. So it's sort of this process of both grieving and learning about how much our forest has shifted with the loss of 5 billion passenger pigeon and pretty similar numbers of American chestnuts. And then returning to the water as it does in its life cycle. But I sort of have these large graphic detailed images, and I've sort of leaning more into the storytelling aspect, really inspired by a lot of the work being done with the red wolf, and the Who Speaks for Red Wolves. That was the first time I'd seen the poster. You described it to me, but I think there's a lot of powerful potential in just storytelling and having the heart of the issue opened up to people through story, which is a really natural, beautiful way to receive information and immerse yourself in a narrative. Regardless, the goal is to do a similar graphic that you can see on the left, surrounding the red wolf, and hopefully get a chance to go out into that ecosystem and spend time and sort of do a collage, bringing in a bunch of the birds and plants and environment in which they're living, with a central focus on the red wolf. But yeah, I'm super inspired by the work you do and feel like our passions have pretty much full alignment, and I'm looking forward to continuing to build things together.
Great. Thank you so much, Spencer. It's awesome to hear about the ways that our conservation work can get involved in the local community and with different fields other than our own. So yeah, anybody who's in the Asheville area or nearby, we would definitely encourage you to go check out Spencer's art, his nature journaling club. And so our next thing is I'm gonna launch another poll to ask you guys, have you learned anything today? Hopefully you have. Awesome. Well, luckily, the results are that 100% of participants learned something today. So that's exactly what these webinars exist for. And we're so glad that you all were able to join us today. The last thing we're going to cover today is other ways that you can get involved. And so obviously, one of those ways is to spread awareness to your friends and family. You have the ground knowledge now to go out and do that. And you can also volunteer with our Red Wolf program. Like we mentioned before, one of our Red Wolf ambassadors, Greg, got involved and became one of our ambassadors through one of these webinars. So we definitely encourage you to do that if you can afford the time to do so. The other thing that's very important, and as Heather mentioned, vehicle collisions have been a huge issue for red wolves, mortality issue for red wolves as of late, is drive the speed limit when you're visiting red wolf country and watch out for them. Also, from the comfort of your own home, of course, you can join Defenders National and Red Wolf Facebook groups and other social media. One of my fellow interns is doing a lot of really cool work with videos on our Instagram and stuff, so would highly recommend checking that out. And then at the national level, you can join efforts to safeguard the Endangered Species Act and other bedrock legislation, super important. You can also stay informed by signing up for action alerts and by visiting our website. And you can also share our action items or other action items relating to the Endangered Species Act on social media. If you've been super inspired by the red wolves today, you can support the program by visiting a species survival program zoo facility. And then finally, you can attend one of our upcoming events that we've mentioned in this presentation. They're always a lot of fun, and it's a great way to kind of get on the ground experience with the wolves. So thank you all so much for coming, and we're gonna open it up to Q&A now. So if anybody has any questions, you can either put those in the chat or unmute yourselves, and between Heather, Tracy, and I will do our best to respond to those.
Well, a quick question, easier to talk than type. Is that next event, is that, I'm sorry, did I miss that? Is the next event in October, is that sponsored by Defenders, or are you guys going to be there?
We are just a participant.
Okay, cool. Are there any other, I know I've gotten like letters in the mail. Are there going to be any kind of like follow-up emails on like next activities or fundraisers? I'm just wondering like what the next communications would be for the Red Wolves. I'll go on mute now, but I was just curious like what the next steps are program wise. Because yeah, I mean, what I've learned is these guys really need some help.
Yeah, they sure do. Granted, I will say there's a lot of people working really hard on them right now. And that is a silver lining. So, you will definitely, the events that we have, on that slide are the only ones that are currently scheduled. But I'm assuming you are on the mailing list to get this webinar, invite. So as long as you are on our email lists, you should get invitations or notices for any event that we hold. Uh, JC, are you in North Carolina or are you elsewhere?
No, I work sometimes in North Carolina in the Research Triangle, but I'm based out of Houston, Texas.
Okay.
Oh,
That's good for us to know though, because sometimes we don't send invites to the whole country. So sometimes we only send invites to people who live in North Carolina, but I think that's really good for us to know, so that we can open up our invite list and make sure that we're hitting other regions.
yeah, yeah. I'm over there in Raleigh and Durham from time to time, so I know the area.
Okay, yeah, and then I'd also say make sure you join the Defenders Red Wolf Facebook group because we do make sure that we post everything there.
That's a good
Yeah.
suggestion. I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it's also nice that we have boots on the ground in Texas then, because that's where the second hope for red wolves stands. Spencer, do you know about that population in Texas? Well, I'll let people who know more about it than I do speak.
Well, so those aren't wolves. And there's a lot of very interesting research being done on that population right now. We're currently referring to those as Gulf Coast canids, because their taxonomy is really a question mark at this point in time. For us, though, it's exciting, mostly from the perspective of the presence of those canids does show that it's possible to have large canids on the landscape doing their job, and balancing those ecosystems and maintaining that role, in the eco region. So yeah, we're definitely not calling them wolves, or rallying the troops for anything just yet, but investing into some research and really taking a look at the DNA and the genetic makeup of those animals and trying to figure out, what we can potentially learn from those animals. Anyone who wants to learn more about those, I recommend going on the Google and searching for Galveston Island canids or Gulf Coast canids.
And Heather and Tracy, we had a couple questions about what the chances are, what the future looks like for the reentry of red wolves into other areas outside of where they currently are.
So that it's a great question. It's a question we always get. I mean, the chances look good, right? And the recovery plan itself states that there will be more than just the North Carolina population area. However, beyond that, it's not even that I'm concealing information. I don't know. That is 100% Fish and Wildlife Service's job, is to evaluate all of the available areas across the historic range and figure out which of those areas is most appropriate and has the best chance of success. Once the service has done their analysis and they decide, assuming they're going to come to us and we'll help with some of that prep work. This is a large reason that the cooperation, the collaborative team was put together, because we knew that we were going to start having these other population areas come up over the next, years. And we needed to make sure that we had a good model for collaboration and cooperation here in North Carolina that we could then pick up and duplicate in these other areas when that time comes. So we have no idea. No, you know, I'm not even going to pretend to have an idea of where those will be. That's it's not up to us to decide, but we are ready and we will support however we can once the service has identified those areas.
And we had another question come in, you know, since vehicles are such a problem right now for red wolves, what one participant was wondering what steps are being implemented to mitigate deaths?
That's a really good question. So we're all really taking a stab at this and trying to figure out what's best. Some of the things Defenders has done is public awareness. We've put up billboards in the area that encourage people to watch for the wolves, letting people know that the wolves are there. Our last billboard said, "Drive like your family lives here," which is, you know, the message we're really trying to get across. And vehicle mortality is not just a red wolf problem. It is a red wolf. I mean, it is a problem for all wildlife in that specific area. The wildlife density is very high. And unfortunately, there just happens to be a big road that everyone uses and goes very, very fast on through those wildlife areas. Another thing the Fish and Wildlife Service has been doing is they have road signs that they move around, and if using their GPS tracking data, if they see that wolves are getting close to roads or crossing the road and doing so, you know, more than just sporadically, they will move those big electronic signs to that area to caution drivers. Red wolves are using the area. Please slow down. Please drive carefully. I don't know how effective they've been to slow people down, but they have at least been effective in building awareness in the area about the wolves being there. Another thing, there's a number of different groups who are investing in road ecology research in the area. So looking for choke points, looking for areas that seem to have more mortality than others, because that helps us decide, you know, where should we start looking at either, you know, putting fencing in or working with DOT on crossings and stuff like that. So there's a number of efforts going on to raise money for crossings. And a lot of those things are still being coordinated and discussed amongst the service and other you know, these conservation organizations. But there's a number of things that are being attempted currently every single day out there. And it's one of those things where we're still just trying to figure out what is the most effective and what's actually going to keep the wolves from being hit.
And I'll add that last year, North Carolina Department of Transportation and North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission signed an MOU saying that they would work together to develop solutions to address wildlife vehicle collisions, not just in this area, but across the state of North Carolina. So that was very encouraging for those of us who work on connectivity and wildlife vehicle collision issues and wildlife crossings. Then the second thing I'll mention is that there is a number of our organizations, Defenders is one, who participates in a coalition, a North Carolina Connectivity and Crossing Coalition. And we meet every couple of months to talk about this very issue, not just in the Red Wolf Recovery area, but across the state. So know that there are a lot of organizations and agencies who are working on this issue because it is such a big issue, and because we have an opportunity under the Biden infrastructure bill that provided lots of money for wildlife crossing infrastructure. So, you know, we're all competing for that money. And just know that North Carolina is working to put in proposals for projects like this.
We also had a question from another participant. Are there any safe exhibits on red wolves in South Florida?
Yes. So I just pulled up the list, and this question has I will make sure that the follow-up email that goes out after this we always send out a follow-up email that has the YouTube link to the webinar once it's uploaded. So when we do that, I will make sure that included in that email is a list of all of the safe facilities around the country. That way you guys know exactly which ones you should be visiting. But to answer your question specifically, Zoo Tampa at Lowry Park is a safe facility. So that's the only one I'm seeing on the list right now for South Florida.
And then Tracy, you touched on this a little bit, but is it feasible to have a wildlife corridor constructed for red wolf safety?
Those of us who are working on the connectivity and wildlife crossing work with an organization called Wildlands Network. And the main thing that they do is promote corridors for wildlife to move in different ecosystems. And there's one that follows the entire eastern seaboard. So just know that, that is underway. It's not specifically for red wolves, but it benefits all the species that are moving north, particularly in the face of climate change, right? We're seeing a lot of animals moving north along the eastern seaboard up through the Appalachian Mountains. They're moving from south to north. So Wildlands Network and lots of other partners are working to promote that. And I think Kent Wimmer, who's on our Florida team, is on this call. And he's been very involved with wildlife corridors in the state of Florida. So just know that it is, there are plans all the way up the East Coast to foster wildlife corridors.
Yeah, and I'll tack on a little to that. I just want to be clear, we have corridors and we have crossings. And I think when we say corridor, we really mean very large landscape scale migratory paths for wildlife. And then there's crossings, which are smaller in scale and focus on, a pinpoint on a road where there's a lot of either collisions or crossing activity going on. But you are correct. Building crossings is incredibly expensive and it is a very, very long process. But they are being discussed and they are being planned. Keeping in mind that 64 is essentially already almost at sea level. And so there are some really unique challenges with constructing a crossing along this road just due to the nature of the ecology. So those are some things to keep in mind, but they are being looked at right now. Plans are being made. And so we do hope to see some new projects going forward soon. Of course, that means government soon, and government soon is slow.
We had another participant ask if the Wolf Center in Columbia is open to tours this summer, and Heather answered this in the chat, but I just wanted to get it out verbally as well. It is open to tours. We encourage visitors. Please get down there if you can. It's a cool, very cool experience. And I will also add that I recently discovered that the North Carolina Wildlife Federation has a red wolf cam on their site. That you can check out any time of the day or night and see what the wolves are up to. So I've been doing that when I need a little break from my work. I go watch the wolves rolling around in their den and stuff. So it's very cute, and you can do that from the comfort of your own home. We had another question on incidents where people mistake red wolves for coyotes. And there have been incidents where they've been shot and killed because they've been mistaken for coyotes. So the question was, is there anything that can be done to help mitigate tragic occurrences like that?
Absolutely. This is a great question. So one of the things I mentioned earlier in the presentation were those collars that the wolves were wearing. And okay, this photo doesn't have one. It's an older photo. So at this time, every red wolf should have an orange collar on. Collared coyotes have white collars on. So while obviously that does not help at all for uncollared animals, it does mean that if someone, you know, is out and about and they have a weapon on them and they see a canid, they should get a pretty clear indication, you know, when they look through their scope or their binoculars, that it is a red wolf. It has a bright orange collar on. That, you know, like I said, that's not really going to help as much with the uncollared canids, but it is our hope that most of the canids are being collared when they do the annual trapping towards the end of the year. I think Helen's bringing up a photo for you.
Oh
So,
man,
it's fine, just scroll through.
sorry.
So you guys can see in this photo though, that bright orange collar, and it's pretty obvious. So Fish and Wildlife Service also gives out cards, identification cards, to hunters who are using this area for hunting. And those identification cards have on there, like, this is a red wolf and this is a coyote, and this is how you can tell the difference between them. And the hope being there that, you know, that card stays in the hunter's back pocket or in their bag that they take out in the stand with them, stuff like that. That way they have a constant reminder that there needs to be some identification going on here because there is an endangered species at play. Another thing that the service is doing is during trapping season, when private landowners are out there trapping on their own lands for coyotes, the service will come out if they get a call, and they will help trappers try to determine if they have coyotes, if they may have accidentally trapped wolves, and then they will even pay those trappers for those animals. So we have a number, the service is doing a lot of things out there to really help kind of, you know, get away from that blurred line of misidentification. And I think it's helping. You know, I personally have not seen nearly as many reports of mistaken identity occurring in recent years. And I think a lot of this is just because we're building awareness, and the service is doing a really good job to make sure that the wolves are more identifiable.
And then we also had a question, do we work with the Red Wolf Coalition?
Of course we do. Yeah, they're a good partner. We work with them on a number of different things. Each of the organizations has its own niche, has it, you know, what it's really good at, and different types of resources. So we use partnerships all of the time, and the Red Wolf Coalition is a big partner of ours.
Great. And Jesse shared in the chat a link to an article that was looking promising on some money that was given to protect wildlife crossings and endangered red wolves through those. Other than that, unless anybody has any last questions, we will finish up about 4 minutes early. Thank you guys so much for coming to the webinar. We've loved being able to engage with you guys, and we're super thankful that you guys came and listened to us talk about our red wolves today.
Thank you guys so much. And keep an eye out for an email from us in a week or two with links to the YouTube and future events. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job. Really enjoyed it.
Glad you could join us.
Melissa, all of the mortality data is pulled directly from Fish and Wildlife's website. I don't pretend to have those numbers myself. I get that information straight from the source. So I would recommend going to Fish and Wildlife Service's Red Wolf page and getting the numbers and the mortality data off of that. It tends to be the most accurate and up to date. Thanks. Have a good afternoon, everyone.